with the current trend of funny HM-2 Boss heavy metal pedals and metal zone pedal videos, often the hyper metal HM-3 is kind of forgotten. The HM-3 hyper metal was released in 1993 to replace the HM-2 heavy metal. Now the design aesthetics are basically the same and it has the same controls as a heavy metal, but most notably, this now required the standard Boss 9-volt adapter that we all know and love today, whereas the heavy metal required a special 12-volt power supply, and it would of course also run on a 9-volt battery, but a lot of pedals were fried when you try to use the wrong power supply. So that is the main upgrade with the hyper metal. It totally does sound a little different, and when comparing it to something like the Metal Zone, this by far had the most amount of gain out of any of the metal pedals in the early 90s. Now the hyper metal came out in 1993, which was 2 years after the Metal Zone. So it kind of never really got out of the shadow of the Metal Zone, and not a lot of people really got into this pedal. It was generally skipped over in favor of the much more popular Metal Zone. So let's see how the hyper metal sounds. I'm gonna do something a little different for this episode of Remember the 90s, and I'm going to use the orange Pedal Baby 100 for a clean power supply, going into the 2 Notes Torpedo Studio with a Mesa Boogie Vintage 30 Impulse, and we will see how the hyper metal sounds going into an extremely flat power section as opposed to a tube section of an amplifier. So let's see how it sounds. All right, so here is my clean signal into the orange Pedal Baby 100 with the hyper metal bypassed. Actually sounds better than I thought it would. It's crunchy. It's definitely like a hyper metal, but not as buzzsaw-y. Let's turn the gain up a little bit. Let's go full up, right? Now, I'm not really a fan of the HM-2. It's just a little too much for me, but I found myself being pretty stoked on the HM-3. And it's weird that I don't really remember this being around in any of the Boss dealers and the music stores I used to frequent as a teenager in the mid-90s. The hyper metal was actually around until it got discontinued in 1999, and you can still find them for about $100, $150 depending on the condition, but they are becoming more of a scarcity as time goes on. All the Pigma links down below in the description. You've been wonderful. I've been Fluff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.